Hi, everyone. Welcome to the B++ podcast, a podcast where we speak to leaders from around the world. And I'm not talking about political leaders. That's rather controversial in these times. I'm talking about thought leaders. I'm talking about business leaders, people who can actually change your lives, people who can tell you what you should do with your businesses, what you can do with your lives, with your jobs. And today, my guest is somebody who can really inspire you to change your life. My guest today, all the way from LA, is Jason Peterson. He's an entrepreneur, innovator, CEO. He's done so many things in life that I think we'll probably need like 10 episodes to talk about each one of them. And maybe that's not enough as well. So, Jason, one of the things that you're known for is, saving the music industry. So maybe you can share a bit about how you did that with the listeners.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I don't know if I can be singularly credited with saving the music industry, but I was a part of the early group of people who saw digital coming, and
Right.
we helped further the transition that has now occurred. And music industry specifically has never been healthier. It's growing like crazy. You've got 5 billion people around the world with access to high-speed wireless internet, smartphones,
Right.
increasing population around the world that have banking relationships. So they have a credit card or a debit card or a bank account and can participate
Mm.
in e-commerce, and they're buying music subscriptions. They're watching advertising, which is monetized for music owners, and generally growing the music industry quite quickly. We went through a really hard time though, with Napster and Grokster and LimeWire and the whole P2P era, which happened around the turn of the millennium.
Right.
The music industry didn't know how to respond.
Yeah.
And the Recording Industry Association of America sued 14,000 Americans for trading files. The record companies were selling compact disc CDs for something like $18.99 retail, so $19 US, and they were forcing the bundle. Consumers didn't like that. They had the free alternative of file sharing, and that really created a hard time for the music industry for about 15 years, from about 2001, 2002 until about the end of 2015. And thanks to Daniel Ek and Spotify and the rest of the streaming revolution, we're back. The music industry, the recorded music industry specifically, is growing over 20% a year, and we expect it to triple in size in the next 10 to
Yeah, that's
15 years.
wonderful. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you sort of crystallize it like that. It did take quite a while for the music industry to sort of democratize, as they say, right? So although so many things had been, education had been, information had been in so many different forms, and yet it took quite a while for music industry to do that, and actually for somebody to do it right, right? So that's also one of the things. And there were a lot of failed attempts, and I remember those days of the government suing people, and it's just scary days, and people just thought, oh my god, what I've been doing is so terrible and illegal, and now it looks like such a distant memory. And I'm glad for where the music industry is, thanks to leaders like yourself. So tell us more about your various businesses. You uh, obviously are the chairman of the Go Digital Media Group. You manage multiple companies. You recently acquired yogaworks. I believe that's an area of interest as well. So, I mean, since you do so much, I mean, I just wanted to understand, uh, your own journey as an entrepreneur. How did you sort of think that I'll be an entrepreneur? You talked about working in the movie industry for quite a while as well. And so, firstly, for all those listeners listening in who are probably, let's say, stuck in their jobs, like a lot of my friends are, very high paying jobs, bankers or whatever, but they just, after a few drinks, they all want to pursue their passion. And then the next morning, the grind starts all over again. And then, so what's the first thing that you would share with people? And not just that, right? People have their responsibilities. How would you say that, a person can continue to push their boundaries and sort of keep reinventing themselves the way you have managed to do?
Well, at the end of the day, I think life's all about how we feel.
Right.
The quality of our life, if you think about it, is really the quality of our
Right.
emotions. And so I would certainly advocate for anybody to pursue what their passions are. And I tell people all the time, look for your zone of
Mm.
genius. Your zone of genius is really the intersection of your God-given talents, if you will, the things that you are good at with what you love to do.
Right.
And I always give the example of, honestly, this example applies to me. I was an athlete growing up, still am, and a musician. And in both cases, it actually applies to both cases. I was pretty good. I was okay, but I wasn't great. And so, like in the athletics context, for example, if somebody wants to be a professional athlete, but they're not quite built for it, right? They're not tall enough, or they don't jump high enough, or whatever the thing is. But maybe they're good with numbers.
Right.
So they become an accountant, for example. Well, they could very easily be a business manager or an accountant for athletes, right? And that might be their zone of genius, applying what they're good at, which is numbers, what they like, which is sports, right? And in my case, I like creative endeavors. I like creating things. I like sharing with other people. And I was a musician growing up. I played piano, played saxophone. I was in jazz band in high school. I convinced our principal when I was 16 years old, who was musically inclined because he had a son in a very popular rock band here in the U.S., to allow me to make a full-length motion picture while I was in high school, which was good for high school, but terrible generally. And I was doing all these creative things. And then when I went to college at the University of Southern California, I found a bunch of really, really talented creative people. And I realized I'm not the only talented creative person in the room. But what there wasn't was anyone to handle their business.
Right.
And I'm a very structured thinker. I have a real knack for numbers. At this point, I'm a licensed attorney. I went to law school. And so it became very obvious to me very quickly that I had a business mind in addition to a creative mind. And in this ecosystem that I was a part of at the University of Southern California, which is the epicenter of the film and television industry in Los Angeles,
right,
there wasn't anybody to handle the business end of things for the creatives. So I became the business end of things for creative people, and I've made a career out of being the business end of things for creative people. And that's been my zone of genius. It's the intersection of what I'm good at with what I like. So that's what I would advocate to anybody that's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or pursuing a passion. Again, the quality of your life is the quality of your emotions. It's all about how you feel. If you're living in your zone of genius and connecting what you're good at with what you like, it's going to be a fantastic ride.
Absolutely. I think that's invaluable, right? What you just shared in terms of the quality of life is the quality of your emotions, right? So in the sense that I'm sure a lot of people are just miserable with their, lives just because of the way they feel, right? And they're the way they feel. So I was speaking to this banker the other day, and he just took a massive step down, and he's doing something in the finance industry. And I said, so how do you feel? And he said, liberated. I feel great. So I think that's wonderful, that you shared that. And the second thing that you pointed out is the fact that, if you're not a sports person, if you're not a musician yourself, but if you are passionate about it, you can always play a very important role within that industry. So it's not that everyone's not created equal. Everyone does not, if you love basketball and if you are not that tall or whatever else it might be, there are so many other things that you can do. So, and I think one of the things is to sort of stay alive to those possibilities as well. That's really important as well. So tell me, how do you, if at all, I mean, if I listen to your story, it doesn't feel like you do, but do you feel that fear, that fear that causes that inertia that stops people from doing what they want to do? Like, how do you go ahead and just sort of create a new company and acquire a new company? And, I'm sure there is some hesitation there. And so how would you say you would overcome that, right?
You just hit on the single most important topic that we could possibly talk about in the context of being an entrepreneur, or honestly, a business person, in my opinion.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I have encountered people who have brilliant ideas,
Right.
They've invented something that could change the world, that could make life better for millions of people,
Right.
but they're too afraid
Mm.
to do anything about it. They're too afraid to bring this invention to market or to talk about it because in most cases, they fear rejection. They fear abandonment.
Right.
And ultimately, what that goes to is a feeling of being unloved, a feeling of being a child thrown out in the woods to be eaten by wolves.
Right.
It's a very primal feeling. And the feeling of being afraid is the single most often felt emotion, in my opinion, that keeps people from being successful in life
Right.
and in business. And so I've done everything I can for especially the last 10 years to metabolize any latent fear-based holding patterns that I have in my psychology. And I've done a lot of work with different experts. Absolutely recommend Dr. Robert Miller in image transformation therapy. He developed this technique here in California with the military to treat
Right.
post-traumatic stress disorder in Marines coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's incredibly effective. Everybody, and I mean everybody, is traumatized. You know, we were bullied in school, parents got divorced, whatever, right? So we were all traumatized in some way, shape, or form throughout our life. And traumas can continue to occur, right? And the question becomes, do we have the tools to deal with the trauma?
Right.
Because if we don't, it has a compound effect. And we'll find ourselves, not conscious, we'll find ourselves having emotional patterns that create behavioral patterns. Because what happens, and I was just talking to a professor at Stanford who was illustrating this to me, what happens is before we act, the part of the brain that feels emotion is activated. So it's literally emotion and then the motor cortex.
Right.
So if we even blink or smile or anything, it's the result of an emotion.
Wow.
And so, you know, we're 100% driven by emotion. We make decisions based on how we feel. And big brands like Coca-Cola have known this for 100 years. That's why they sell happiness.
Right.
Right? Ads for Coca-Cola aren't saying, they're not technical. They're like, oh, you know, this ingredient is going to increase your blood pressure if you have low blood pressure. They're not selling something like that. They're literally selling the feeling of happiness, right? Yeah. And because they understand that we as humans make decisions based on how we feel. So again, the number one thing we can do for ourselves in life and in business is to confront our fears, to confront our stored fear-based holding patterns. And we all have them. We all have behavioral patterns in life that come from latent trauma, and we've got to get ahead of that. We've got to metabolize it. We've got to get it out of our body. Our nervous system has memory, and we've got to metabolize it through. And then the most amazing things happens. Our feeling state changes. It's not conscious. Our feeling state just changes. And as a result, our behaviors change.
Wow. Yeah.
And I had a very significant fear of abandonment for a long time, and I had to do the work, and that unlocked everything for me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing that. I mean, you know, very personal, and, you know, and that's when, you know, it's the most inspiring because, you know, and thanks, you know, sort of for letting the listeners know that, you know, we are all vulnerable. We are all dealing with something. So, you know, so if as a listener, you're thinking right now, you know, why me? Then, I mean, that's the worst thing that you can sort of do to yourself. It's all of us, right? So just embrace it. And, you know, what Jason said, sort of work on it, right? We all have to work through it. And the fact is that's probably holding you back. And again, there are so many ways to do that. And, you know, we talk about, you know, I was, you know, watching some spiritual leader talking about the fact that, you know, we die every night and then we wake up the next morning. So, you know, so much of the things that we worry about, so much of the anxiety, right? The failure, the abandonment, it doesn't even matter, right? In the long term, it doesn't even matter. So, right, just get up and do the things that you really want to do. And I guess one of the things that's important, and Tony Robbins talks about it, is the pull factor, right? So if you keep pushing yourself to do something, you'll probably feel the fatigue, you'll feel the exhaustion, you'll feel like, why you're doing it. But if you get up in the morning and, again, like your story, music's always been in your life, and, sports, and, and that sort of keeps you going as well. So, which brings me to the next question. I believe you're quite, passionate about, body movement. And I guess that's one of the reasons you acquired YogaWorks. So maybe you can share with the listeners what YogaWorks is and what sort of got you to acquire, and what can we expect?
That's a great question. YogaWorks is one of, if not the oldest yoga studio business in the United States. It helped create this culture of yoga that we now have in the United States.
Right.
And it had become the largest yoga studio business in the US. It was traded on the NASDAQ. And then with COVID, of course, got into trouble when they had to close all their studios.
Right.
They've since, in partnership with us, reinvented themselves as, I like to say, the Peloton of yoga,
Right.
where you have tens of thousands of people logging in to do yoga online, on demand, or in live classes. We coined this term two-way live.
Right.
So you're in a live class, you can see the teacher can see you. And, we view it, to be simple about it, as a health and wellness network. So again, we have two divisions in our business, music and networks. And you think about a network in the traditional sense, you think of like a broadcast TV network, right? It's a linear experience, or maybe a cable TV network. But today, with the over-the-top explosion, right, a network is not purely broadcast on TV. I mean, you can look at the historically major networks like HBO,
Right.
and they're not just broadcast on TV, right? They're multi-platform. They're available on any device. They're a hybrid of on-demand and linear. Some are subscription business models. Some are free ad-supported business models. Some are both. So YogaWorks today is largely a network, right? It's a multi-platform network. You can log in on your various devices and engage in health and wellness programming. And what we're doing with networks is essentially building the Viacom of the OTT revolution, which is a group of special interest channels. We have a company named Latino Music, which is essentially MTV in Spanish.
Right.
We have a company called MeToo Networks, MITU Networks, that's something like BuzzFeed for Latinx audiences in the U.S.
Right.
And then we have YogaWorks, which is a health and wellness network.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, firstly, I'm very happy you're doing something with yoga and, reviving yoga. So I think you're the real revival man, Jason, right? So whether it's music, whether it's yoga, and I'm glad you're doing that. And it's something that people desperately need in today's day and age. And again, it's the democratization of, something which, was accessible only to a few people, right? So, and now it's available. And another thing they talk about, and spiritually speaking, I mean, since yoga being the union of the mind, body, and the soul, is the fact one of the very important things for you to sort of succeed. And that's not just applicable for yoga, for any sort of good habit that you want to form or positive change that you want to make, is that you should have like-minded people working with you, right? So, and then this network effect that you're talking about, this community, and people can join. So for instance, if my neighbors are not interested in yoga, I may have a community that I can rely on anywhere in the world, and that's fabulous. And so would people from Asia, for instance, or people from any part of the world be able to sign up for these lessons and be part of all the YogaWorks activities now?
Our plan is to take YogaWorks global. Right now, all the programming is in English, and it's typically timed for the live classes for the time zones in the United States.
Mm.
We do intend, however, though, to roll out YogaWorks in other countries, in the local languages, local time zones.
Mm.
We're looking for the best ways to do that. So you certainly will see it available in localized versions around the world. If you wanted to log in today and participate in English language programming live in a two-way live environment, you could do that. You can also do it on demand anytime you like.
Right. Wonderful. So for all of you who are in Asia and are insomniacs and you're up, just go and do some yoga, and that'll help you sleep as well. Do some yoga nidra, as they call it. So that'll be very useful. So Jason, I mean, that's fabulous, right? So, tell me, you talked about something very powerful earlier. You talked about the fact that, you know, you love sharing, right? So, for instance, I think if I look at a pattern, and I probably shouldn't be looking at patterns or something, you've done so much in your life, is the fact that you look at music, and, you started with ad share, and you found a way to monetize music on YouTube after that whole uh, Napster era was gone, and then now you're doing it with YogaWorks or something. How much of it is driven by business, and how much of it is driven by your maybe an innate desire to share with everyone whatever is available?
Thank you for framing it that way. I'm trying to operate in my zone of genius, right? Which is being the business end of things for creative people and building and sharing culturally significant content with the world. And so for music, it all starts, really for any of it, video included, it all starts with a vision.
Mm,
And in the early 2000s, I was looking at cell phones
mm,
and MP3 players, Discmans, Walkmans, going, why would you carry two?
right,
And this preceded iTunes, this preceded the iPod. And then when Apple launched iTunes, launched the iPod, YouTube launched in 2005, these were all validating activities that occurred out in the market.
right,
I decided to launch the company and start to do something about it. And to your point, we were the first company in the world helping Google, who had bought YouTube, identify, track, and monetize all this user uploaded content that was going on the platform, much of which incorporates professional content.
right,
And so, that and my prior activities, producing movies, commercials, and television, are all geared towards creating and distributing content that we can share as a community. I personally didn't know it at the time when I started my career, but I love music more than any media format
right.
because it is the form of media that most quickly impacts your emotions.
Yeah,
If you've ever tried to watch a TV show or a movie with no sound, it has no emotional impact.
yeah,
Yet you can listen to an Adele song and start crying, in a few seconds. So, music to me really impacted my emotions, and that's why I've spent so much of my career and so much of our company in the music space. But I'm just trying to live in my zone of genius again, doing what I love in an area where I'm talented.
right. And I'm so glad that you answered this question the way you did, and thank you for your honesty about it. And I mean, again, because firstly, it does not have to be a business decision or a personal decision, right? So, for instance, it you don't have to choose. It's not an either or situation. It's like you can be absolutely passionate about something and really be good at something, and you have the god-given right to monetize it and make your life better. And so this whole sometimes it's just like people try to make you feel guilty for your own success, and that's a bit of a strange thing as well, and that's a pattern that I've seen with some entrepreneurs as well, and something that we all need to unlearn, right? If we do fall into that trap, because sometimes it does happen. The other thing that that you mentioned, which was really phenomenal, is you know you spoke about it earlier, about the fact that if you're not good at something, it's fine, right? So, for instance, one of the things, I don't live with many regrets or what ifs in my life, but one of the things I've always felt is, what if I was a musician, or I wish I was a musician or something, right? Because like you said, it's the one form of art, if you can call it that, or it's so much more than just an art form. Is it can have the most sort of immediate effect, like you mentioned, and also the fact that it's truly moving, it's truly life changing. So I really do wish sometimes that I was. And but based on what you said earlier, I mean, I'll try to get rid of my limitations. Maybe there's something for me to do in the music industry as well. Just because I'm not a musician shouldn't stop me from doing that. So, Jason, with so much going on, in your involvement with music, you are on the board of so many companies, with YogaWorks. What's your, what's on your, sort of agenda for the months to come, right? We live in dystopian times, and we live in these strange times with this pandemic. What are some of the things that you are very passionate about? And, like you were talking about your zone of genius, what is that going to produce soon? Or is it something that's already in the works?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to back up to your commentary for a second. I think it's really important that people do what they love, not necessarily for the money. And if you do it really well, the money will come. That said, I also think it's really important, and I've experienced this firsthand, that as entrepreneurs, we execute in large and fast growing markets. And I define a large market as 10 billion US dollars a year or
Right.
more
Mm.
and growing. I've certainly gotten into a couple of industries. Digital media supply chain was one of them, which was a small and shrinking market
Right.
due to price competition. And it doesn't matter how well you execute. If you're in a small and shrinking market, you're not going to do well. Whereas if it's a large and fast growing market, the rising tide will raise all boats. So something to keep in mind. With regard to your question about, where are things going? What are we doing? We have a vision on the one hand in our music division to build what we would call the fourth major music company. There's Universal, Sony, and Warner Brothers today.
Right.
We'd like to be the fourth major. And on the network side, I used the analogy earlier, we're building the Viacom of the over-the-top video revolution. We had broadcast for a long time, then we had cable TV, now we have internet-delivered video, commonly called over-the-top video. And those are the two primary pillars on which we're operating today. You will see a third pillar. We're working on a third pillar in e-commerce here in the U.S. The commerce business generally is about a $4 trillion a year business. And the e-commerce component in 2019 was $600 billion a year of that $4 trillion.
Right.
That increased almost 50% in 1 year. It added more than $200 billion, closer to $300 billion in market size in 1 year due to the strange times, as you said, with COVID. That is an enormous and fast growing market. And we feel like with a lot of the marquee brands that we have in our portfolio, YogaWorks is a great example, we should have a commerce offering, right? YogaWorks created the market that you see companies like Lululemon and Alo Yoga inhabiting, companies that sell tons of merchandise. Yoga pants for women have become sort of like an everyday item. They can dress them up, they can dress them down. They're not just for athletics.
Yeah.
And yet YogaWorks has taken no part in the development of the apparel industry around yoga wear. So you'll see us spinning up a commerce pillar. That will be the third pillar of the group in years to come.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I mean, there is definitely a lot of action. There's so many wonderful things that you've sort of shared with us today, from sort of, overcoming your fears and the fact that, everyone has them, and, you just have to acknowledge them and work through them, from the point of, the fact that you have to recognize what you're good at and what you're passionate about and find the genius zone, like you said. That's fantastic. It'll stay with me for a long time. And then of course the fact that from a business point of view as well, just the kind of industry that you pick, right? And that's a valuable point as well. So sometimes, I've seen, and we work a lot with startups, and I've seen that entrepreneurs get very carried away with a certain emerging technology, and they don't realize sometimes that is not either a large enough industry, or is not fast growing enough, or not fast growing enough yet. So that's a very, very important point as well. And finally, your love for sharing, and keep that going. And thank you so much for sharing with us today, Jason Peterson. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a wonderful conversation. We learned a lot. I'm sure you inspired thousands and thousands of people today. Thank you.